welcome to the latest episode of Jackals and Tackles, a rugby podcast looking at the week's action of rugby that's just gone past and looking to the upcoming rugby that we shall enjoy. Now, I am happily joined by Henry. Henry, how are you again?
I'm all good. How about yourself?
Me, I can't complain. Obviously, very strange weekend of rugby we had, and obviously we're not joined by Ricky this week. We've had a wee bit of a mix and match, which is always fun. But look, I'm going to start us off and open this up, as I say, about the weekend of rugby. Is the Champions Cup dead?
I wouldn't call it dead, but it's definitely dying.
That's that's not good.
I'd say what is dead is the Challenge Cup because I mean, if the Champions Cup's not doing well, the Challenge Cup is completely irrelevant. To be honest, half the Champions Cup teams should be in that. Like we've seen so many blowout results this weekend. There's been a couple of really gripping games, like what was it? Glasgow versus Toulouse. You know, that big comeback win. That was a fantastic game to watch. But then equally, Quinn's been struggling in the Premiership, and they go and destroy Bayonne 68-14. It's almost become like the group stage has become that sort of old top 14 stereotype of as long as you win your home games, that's what matters. I think a big format change is needed.
Well, I think where the piss take began was for the last two seasons, Ulster qualified for the knockouts, winning one game. Like, how do you progress with one game of a win?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. When you've got 24 teams in the tournament and 16 go through, what's the point in having the group stage? We've talked about it with the World Cup because that's going to be a similar affair, but that's, I suppose, slightly different because it's the first time they've tried it. There's no reason for 70 teams to be getting into knockout matches in the Champions Cup. Keep it as the pinnacle, go to the quarterfinals, maybe even reduce the competition down to 20 teams, make the Challenge Cup more relevant because it used to be such a good tournament. And yeah, maybe that would help bring the tournament back because we've seen so many half-empty stadiums this weekend, which is not what the Champions Cup should be. It should be the pinnacle.
Well, look, I was listening to Rory O'Connor talking about this. Obviously, the Irish rugby journalist. He was talking about the reason that it changed was, and this is what he said. He said it was to kind of keep Toulouse in the competition. So they finished eighth one year in the top 14. Now, back under the previous system, they wouldn't have qualified. And Toulouse are arguably the biggest team in Europe, to be fair. Now, I think that if you finish eighth, you should not be qualifying for Europe, be that now, be that then. I do personally look at obviously that Toulouse example, but the Premiership sides and the French sides took it upon themselves to destroy the competition from the old Heineken Cup because they weren't happy with the involvement or the money and with the calendars as well, destroying their competitions. Um, I don't think they were happy as well that they weren't winning as often as they'd hoped because Munster and Leinster had started to dominate a bit in the early 2010s, late 2000s. Obviously, had English winners in there like London Wasps and stuff, but I still don't understand. Sorry, I don't understand. I do understand. Money drives everything, and that's what fueled the change. But we've now seen the destruction of the competition. Whereas you're saying half empty stadiums, what money is being generated through that? What TV money cannot sustain this competition forever because if you're not producing a good product, what TV company will pay for it? Like they've already like, look, I'm from Ireland. I've lived in Ireland. Premier Sports is an Irish brand in terms of the coverage. TNT used to have it. It used to obviously be a lot more accessible for English fans because it would have had the TNT from potentially buying to watch soccer as well. Moving to Premier Sports has been a hindrance, is in my view. As much as I enjoy the coverage they do for the Champions Cup and for the URC, but it's not helped in terms of helping get that English crowd. Which, if you're looking at where the money is in terms of rugby, it probably is within England. Obviously, France has its own whole thing going, and obviously there's loads of money there. But when it comes to the paying fan, I think English fans go out in their numbers when they are interested in the product. Um, I don't know. Look, my solution would be to take it down to 16 teams. You then put the Challenge Cup as 16 teams. The winner of the Challenge Cup enters the Champions Cup. for the next season, giving them something to play for, as you said, in that dead competition of the Challenge Cup. And if you didn't qualify for either, then boo-hoo, you don't play in Europe. Do you know what I mean? The way it used to be. Um, I think that's the only solution. But then the thing is how do you convince teams to sign up to this thing of they're currently getting money? How do you just say, right, can you give up the money that you're currently getting?
Yeah, I think the point you made about Premier Sports is quite interesting because obviously anecdotally, talking to someone that I play rugby with, and he was saying last week, it's like, oh, does anyone know where I can go and watch in London, where I can go watch Bath versus Munster is? Nowhere. The only place that really I know that's been showing has been the Cabbage Patch, because of course they are. But
Yeah.
you can't just walk into a pub in London and expect it to have it on because they're not going to pay hundreds of pounds to only have the Champions Cup on Premier Sports. It's just not a viable thing for them. And so that was really, I think, hindered the game very much in England. But yeah, it's I am quite keen on a radical idea to get rid of the South African teams. But that's but that's more of a grand scheme that I don't think the South African team should be in the European tournament, but I do think they should be almost a competition. I don't know how it works with scheduling, but there should be a competition in the Southern Hemisphere, sort of where they go and do their own thing with the Super Rugby teams, and maybe even bring Japan in and sort of make a Southern Hemisphere version of the Champions Cup. Could become quite profitable, particularly with the idea of this whole Club World Cup coming in. But yeah, I think they've sort of got themselves in a really difficult position in terms of trying to get teams to give up that money. And I personally think the way forward is really build up the Challenge Cup again, because when that was a tournament that teams wanted to play and wanted to win, that still drew massive crowds even to the finals. When that'd be the day before the Champions Cup final in the same venue, you'd still pack out the stadium. I think that's probably the answer, but it would be difficult to convince other teams.
Well, you talk about obviously South African teams like they are never going to leave because of the URC agreement and what's in place there. They've been a benefit for the URC, to be fair. Obviously, it's difficult to go away to South Africa, but they've added so much to that competition. They've added an extra bit of variety. I understand what you're talking about in terms of the European issues, like they are South Africa, and why are they competing in Europe? But my kind of question, my kind of answer to that is the Stormers manager came out just before the tournament and said, "Look, we've not taken this competition seriously previously, and the Stormers are taking it seriously now because he said otherwise we will get kicked out." So they actually have to this year show that they're willing to make it a priority to an extent, because I do think there was a tiredness of South African sides sending B teams away. But then again, you look at Gloucester when they went to Munster this weekend. Everyone knew they were going to lose straight away when they saw the teams being read out. Gloucester's head coach, he spoke to the press after, and he was like, "Look, I just don't have the squad to be able to compete in two fronts." Do you know what I mean? As you say, a team like that who finished, where did they finish last year in the Premiership? Between sixth and eighth, so one of the lower
Yeah,
sides. So why are they competing in a competition for the elites when, as you perfectly rightly said, they should be probably competing in the Challenge Cup, where you bring teams like that who are of a decent standard to play in the Challenge Cup and that be it. Do you know what I mean? And if they win it, they earn the right to get that extra pay packet to go compete in the Champions Cup. Do you know what I mean? Like Munster finished sixth last year and they're playing in the Champions Cup. They're nowhere near what they used to be. They aren't of that standard. They aren't of the elite standard. But the thing is, and what's concerning is you've got 24 teams in that um, Champions Cup. Ricky and I last week we listed 4 or 5 teams that theoretically take it seriously. Like that's worrying.
yeah. I think particularly in the group stage with what you said about Ulster, you need one game to get through. It's become ridiculous. But those knockout games is where the competition really starts. It does make you wonder whether maybe an option could be even to scrap the group stage entirely, make it a complete knockout tournament, sort of FA Cup style, draw teams out of a hat. But I don't think that would be the answer, but it could be a way to liven up the competition.
Oh, 100% would liven up, but then you'd have everyone kicking off about being like, well, we want our money. Again, it all just boils down to money, and that's a sad, sad issue.
I think
Go ahead, sorry.
the other thing I just don't like is the way the knockout stage is sort of formatted, where it's 1v16, 2v15, and it just how can you invest in a competition if you don't know what your progression is going to be? How like Where do you go from there?
Well, I think the point is they do know where their progression's going to be. I think what they're hoping for is they have the best two teams reach the final, which is why it's very much scheduled like tennis. And like you, I don't agree with it. I don't like it. I feel that you should be given the round of 16 or the quarter final. Yeah, okay, go play against the side because you finished top of the group. If it was a 16 team thing, you play against teams that finish second in the group, and that be it. Do you know what I mean? You get drawn against them, but it's the two best teams. So you're always going to play someone decent. It's always going to be a decent fixture, but you get the home draw. But then after that, it's random. Do you know what I mean? I think there is ways around it, but I don't think it will ever change. And I think the top 14 and the Premiership, because teams take that more serious, this competition is always going to struggle. Also, as we mentioned when we were working together earlier, the last five winners have all been French. Do you know what I mean? Before that, it was Leinster, I believe, or was it Saracens? No, it was Exeter. It was Exeter. Um, and then you had Leinster, and then you had the Saracens. It's not being kind of spread out in terms of winners, but the thing is, you always had Leinster reaching the final too, so it wasn't really being spread out in terms of who was reaching the final. Northampton reaching the final was an absolute shock last year. Otherwise, Leinster would have reached another final.
But then
So
even that
there's an
wasn't
issue.
competing over two fronts. That was them completely packing it in the Premiership, going, okay, we can actually do something in Europe.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I'm saying, like, there's clearly a huge issue. But I was listening to uh, Fitzgerald, Luke Fitzgerald talking, and he said there's just too much rugby. There is too much. He says it needs to be brought back a wee bit. One, because you are not getting the best players every week. Like, the toll on their bodies is too much. They play all these high quality, super intense matches at the highest level. And I kind of agree with him. You want to see the best product put out there. Every club is having loads of financial strain put on them because they have such big squads. The solution is maybe scale back the amount of rugby we're playing.
Yeah, 100%. Like if you sort of do the maths, how many Champions Cup games if you get to the finals? What, like seven or eight? If you're in the Premiership, you're playing, was it 18 games during the regular season plus any Premiership Cup if you're playing that any internationals, and players are limited, at least in England, to like 30 games a season. Mathematically, they can't play at all. But then teams need the money. It's not like football where you can have midweek games. Like stadiums need to get fans in the stadiums to make that money. That's how teams run. So it is very much catch 22 that teams find themselves in.
100%. But look, we can keep going around in circles about the death of the Champions Cup. Shall I move on to Premiership slash URC discussion, which is the big one? London Irish, what do you think? Talks about them coming to the URC. Would you like to see it?
I would, but only if it was Irish. If it was Wasps or Worcester, absolutely not. But I think the fact that London Irish have always been the exiles, I think it would work. But I mean, I wrote about it back when we were at TBR Rugby, and that I think it's something that could be quite fun. It could be a really, I know the RFU won't like it on paper, but I think it could be a really fun thing. And actually, if it gets embraced, it could bring the best out of both sides. It could give players an opportunity to play. If it's an Irish player, for example, they could sort of come through. It could be a real exile sort of academy like they have at age grade level. It could become that for England and overseas players. And then it could also become sort of a way that players can stay in England and experience a new competition.
Oh, 100%. I personally feel Ireland should use it to their benefit. Like, obviously, we have the rules in Ireland about you can't play international rugby unless you're playing for an Irish province. But you could always kind of expand that over and build the squad even bigger because Ireland's biggest issue at the minute is their squad building in terms of getting quality players in. If you had five teams where you could get quality players from, it'd be very useful. Now, that's not to say that obviously the RFU wouldn't want to use it as a kind of benefit for them as well, but they could probably come to an agreement because obviously the RFU don't have a share in the URC. So they could try and look at it that way of, look, we want to develop English talent too. And when you're playing against, as I mentioned, those South African sides, England and every nation need to learn how to play South African style rugby and compete against South African style rugby. And the only team in England that really do that is Bath. You do need to learn how to combat it. And if you're getting players in there to combat it and then be able to discuss it on camp and stuff like that, it could be beneficial towards England as well. And then learning how the Italians play, learning how the Welsh play, the Scots, the Irish, coming up against all that, the different kind of approach every week would be beneficial to an English player. So I think there's benefits everywhere. The only place that doesn't benefit, in my opinion, is the Premiership, because the Premiership, as much as it can be entertaining, I think it is lacking. I think it needs 12 teams. I know I've literally just mentioned that there needs to be less rugby. Um, but I do think that 12 quality teams, and I say quality because Newcastle need to start showing something. I had hopes for them this year, but they really need to start showing something. Because having Worcester and having London Irish, having a Doncaster or Coventry in there, if they're good enough, why not have 12 good teams to compete and spread it out and bring in more talent and develop?
I mean, exactly that. I think I would prefer to see London Irish in the Premiership, but if the URC is an option and the Premiership sort of becomes a very difficult thing, particularly one of the big issues being sort of the stadium requirements to get in, and obviously London Irish probably won't go back to Brentford. They've sort of burnt those bridges from what I've heard. They've got a massive fan base. It could be a really positive way for them to kind of expand and kind of create something quite exciting in English rugby, which that hasn't really been on the club level for a little while.
Do you think it's unfair? Because I've mentioned this previously on Black Lion in Georgia, who have been trying for years to break into the URC, and they've been playing the Challenge Cup. Look, I understand the results have never been great, but the thing is they're not getting consistent rugby at that level. So how do they ever develop? How do they develop Georgian rugby unless they are allowed in the sacred center? Like as I said to a friend, I could see a Spanish team getting a new URC before a Georgian team.
Yeah, I think almost if London Irish got in, it would open the door for them because, if they say replaced a Welsh team, yeah, the number of teams would stay at 16, but then you're sort of opening the door for, okay, maybe Black Lion could come in, maybe you could have the Jaguares could kind of relocate to Spain, as I've seen some people suggesting over the last couple of weeks, and have sort of that Argentine core in the URC, or maybe even, was it the Cheetahs? You could have them sort of come back into the URC. I think London Irish kind of would almost give them that bit of hope.
Yeah, again, the only issue is we scheduling in terms of how they schedule the URC with their trips to South Africa and their trips to Italy, because then you'd have to add in the Georgian trip, which is even further away, and stuff like that. So, as much as I'd love to see a Georgian side in to help develop the game and develop rugby as a worldwide thing, because I think that we are stuck in this. As much as I love the sport, we are stuck with the same teams, same countries, doing everything in every competition, and it does get a bit boring to an extent. Like I would love next year if Italy were to win the Six Nations and do something incredible. I know it's not going to happen, but I'd love to see something random. And in rugby, it's very predictable. A lot of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I think like sort of the big bit of excitement we've had over the last few years has sort of been Japan really rising through and sort of the Japan Rugby League One sort of becoming a real thing, but that's still very over sort of out the way. So kind of you don't really see about it unless you really go hunting for it.
Yeah. But look, we'll park that to one side and we'll come on to what you wish to discuss, which is transfer business. It seems to be a crazy season at the minute in terms of particularly Premiership rugby. So, what do you want to discuss? Who's your big going? Who's your big signings, and what's all going on in your wee head?
I suppose the big ones at the moment have been the four that have come out of Gloucester over the last couple of days. We've had sort of a bit of a Welsh merry-go-round there. So we've
Yeah,
had Jack Morgan and Dewey Lake both joining, got Thomas Williams leaving, and now it's come out that Dan Robson's coming back, which is really exciting for them. They've really been on the rise over the last season or so.
yeah. Well, look, do you think it maybe points to which Welsh region might be disappearing?
Yeah, that's the downside of it is that the Ospreys on paper probably shouldn't be the ones to go, but it sort of does seem that if those two key players, like but both Welsh captains, are kind of turning around and going, sod you, I'm going over to England, I'm crossing the bridge. It kind of does say that the Ospreys probably are going.
And obviously they aren't the only team to do a bit of business at the minute. How are you feeling about maybe some Harlequins businesses going down at the minute?
Yeah, it's a strange one. I don't believe it until it's actually confirmed. But the rumor is that George Furbank could be on his way, which I think raises a lot of questions from the Quinn side because how does he slot in? Is Tyrone Green sort of been the mainstay at fullback? Would he shift to the wing, or is he on his way? Is he going to go back to South Africa? Is he? I mean, he's, in my opinion, international quality fullback. He could very well sort of be on that South African radar. He could return to the Lions or go somewhere else in South Africa. So where would he slot in? Would he go onto the wing? Would he even go onto the bench with Caden Murley and Rodrigo Isgrove kind of being those staples on the wing sequence now?
Well, would you? There's a few things I heard about the Harlequins or just Quins in regards to the news with Furbank in terms of it would be a statement signing, one, but does it then limit your ability to sign players elsewhere that you might need?
Quinns have done some quite good business over the last year or so. They brought in a load of Argentine guys, which have been a real benefit. You got Guido Petty, you got a couple of props, you got Boys Wenger, and yeah, I think it would. They've done a lot of those sort of under the radar statement signings that probably should have got more attention, but I think it would be a real statement of intent. I think it probably would indicate that someone's on his way, whether that's, I mean, Alex Dombrandt's sort of been out of the squad for a little bit. I think that's been more injuries though. I think he's only recently really signed a new contract. Maybe it could be Tyrone Green on his way. Then the other concern with Furbank is that he's quite an injury-prone player, but I think he probably would complement Marcus Smith quite a lot because they're both sort of that almost fly half fullback model. I mean, Furbank's played fly half. Started there for England against Tonga a few years ago. So I think that could be almost, on one hand, for Marcus Smith, it could be kind of a statement to say, I'm not playing fullback for England, but at the same time, he's going to be learning from a player that's in a lot of ways quite similar. And maybe it could
Hmm.
even boost himself and be sort of a negative for Furbank in some ways.
I noticed you didn't mention Kieran Treadwell, the Ulster legend, as part of your great
Yeah.
signing, but well, come on, man. No, is there anyone else that you kind of was obviously you mentioned Gloucester and all this? Like there's some rumours going around the URC about Jordan Larmour leaving Leinster, about him going to Connacht, which
Interesting.
for me, it would be look, Jordan Larmour was probably one of the most promising players about 10 years ago. There was people thinking he would be an Irish international week in, week out. It hasn't worked out that way because of injuries and other players that have proven themselves. But I think a move to Connacht to get more game time because look, he's now, I don't know whether he's 30 or over the hill of 30. You've got still James Lowe, who's 33. Like you're around the same age, not really going to outmuscle him to have a long career over him. Do you know what I mean? You've also got O'Brien on the right wing, who isn't going to lose his spot. And you still got Keenan at the back and Osborne, who's getting chosen at fullback ahead of him if there was an injury issue. So why wouldn't he just go to Connacht and play under Stuart Lancaster again and be like, look, yeah, love it. Play with Mac Hansen one wing, put him on the other wing, and kind of play free flowing attacking rugby again. I think there's no harm in doing it. Now, obviously for me, the other one would be like there's no talk of him, but Kieran Foley should just move on. Find himself a new home, find him somewhere to get a wee hug and be loved a bit. Because I feel like he's not getting any. Is there anywhere else in the Premiership that might have caught your eye as well?
So the other one that I think you might be a little bit interested in is Nicky Smith going from Leicester Tigers to Sale Sharks.
I saw that. I saw that. I got messaged about that this morning in terms of from the press officer. And look, they're still doing big business. Seal. It's not the business that they might really need in terms of. I still feel they need a bit more power. Like they're a power team. They want to be that South African mold. Um, and obviously they're chasing Cunningham South, and they aren't going to get him. But I feel like that's Sanderson's real target is to get someone like that. I also think he's missing a trick in terms of Rob Dupree going because what versatile player does he have that could do what Rob Dupree does? I know he's brought in Marchand back to the centre and all that, but he can't fit it. He can't slot in at 10 if George Ford needs a rest. I know you got the youngster coming through, but It's not versatile. You haven't got that leadership kind of qualities within it. I feel like that's where they're going to be missing. And that's what they're going to miss. Like, in my opinion, is they need that leader. They need that power coming through. Um, but apart from that, Smith's a good signing. So to raise on your point. But talking about Seal, what do you think about Marco Bortolami getting, I don't want to say the boot, but it feels like he's got the boot. Pardon me, by the way, all I could think about was Inglorious Bastards during the pronunciation of his name when I was reading it. And look, go for it. What do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because he only really joined, what was it, last season? Um,
Yes, he
yeah,
joined ahead of the
it's
season.
yeah. So I mean, they've definitely got the squad to compete. What are they 2 wins from 6 games, hitting seventh in the league. It's kind of a sign that he never really settled in. That you know maybe there was just they didn't bond sort of behind the scenes. But yeah, it's a strange one.
I think you're right. Look, I was reading some reports about it in terms of people on Twitter and from the Italian journalists. People went back and read what the Italian journalists spoke about it at the time, which was their surprise Seal went for him because of his style of coaching in terms of and his personality of he's not one of those people to give you a hug and have your arm around your shoulder. He's more abrasive and that might not be what they needed. And that's the reports that they've said. So surprised by that. Like there's no doubt he's a good coach with what he did with Benetton. And he got the best out of those players. But maybe that's not what Seal needed. And look, I think I think in terms of the attack, like he loves having free flowing attack. But you saw the way Seal played against Clermont in the Champions Cup. No one expected them to win. I, when I saw the team sheet, thought they're going for the win. Didn't expect them to win, but I knew they were going to battle because they normally don't send a team like that across with a lot of stars. The only player missing really was George Ford, and I think that's because of injury. But they went over, they competed, they got rid of Bordelami on Friday, which kind of was a statement of we're not going to play your way anymore. We're going to go back to what we are used to doing, and what we're used to doing works. I feel there was an element of that. I feel I don't know where they go because what coaches are out there for them to get? Does Sanderson kind of take a step back from the director of rugby and go into a head coach role for a wee while he searches, or does he promote someone to do that role? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, you do sort of wonder whether it was meant to be kind of that yin and yang sort of thing with him and Sanderson. Sanderson's quite a brash personality, but also quite a sort of caring version of that. They could have. There's a argument that they could have really complemented each other quite well, but I couldn't 100% see how they would kind of clash, and it just wouldn't quite work. I think it's almost you need the right, not necessarily the right approach, or not necessarily the right coaching sort of mindset in terms of being that sort of South African vibe, but I think you almost need kind of more the right personality at this point if you're going to make that change, if you're going to make that sort of statement. And so we've got 8 minutes left.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I understand that. And look, it's disappointing because you never like to see a team that you've got kind of feelings for, a soft spot for, going through turmoil. Do you know what I mean? I can't imagine how you've spent your life being a Harlequins fan. Um, but look, it is what it is. So, shall we wrap this up with a little bit of Prem fixture previews?
Sounds
Now,
good to me.
obviously, we don't have the team sheets. We're just going off what we presume teams might do. Leicester v Gloucester. What do you think will happen there?
I mean, Leicester are probably, well, I mean, they're one of the stronger sides. Gloucester have really surprised me this season. I know they had massive like influx of players coming in, some really good quality players, particularly, a few from Quinns. But I think, Leicester at home, you can never bet against Leicester at home. I'll bet against Leicester at home.
Yeah. So you're saying a Leicester will win?
I think so, yeah.
I don't look for me. If Gloucester name the best team that they can name, which by the looks of things, with the team they sent over to Munster, they're going to. I think Gloucester could really surprise here because Leicester put up a team to fight Leinster, and I think it might have taken a wee bit out of them. I'm going for a Gloucester win to be honest. Going to say against the odds because as you say they played well, not got the results, but I can see them doing something. What do you think of Northampton Seal?
Northampton have been quietly, well, not even quietly, they've just been impressive this year. I think, like as we just mentioned, sort of Sale had that big statement result. So I think that probably did take a lot out of them quite emotionally. I think Northampton have been very steady this year, sort of building on what they had in the Champions Cup last year. So I think going to go Northampton's way.
No, I fully agree with you. There's nothing to add. You've summed up everything I would have said, to be honest. So I would agree, Northampton. What about Saracens and Exeter?
Yeah, I mean, again, Exeter have been another really surprising team this year. I know they've had those big Australian imports, they've had quite a few big signings, but they were miserable last year. And Saracens with Owen Farrell, like you kind of expected better from them. I think, Saracens. What was their result? They lost by 5 points against the Sharks at the weekend. That
Yeah.
would have taken going out to South Africa. That would have taken, was it out in South Africa? Yeah.
Yes.
That would have taken quite a bit out of them, particularly with the travel. I can sense a bit of an extra upset.
I do too. Obviously, the upset seal. I feel like is the travel will be a big part. So yeah, I think it'll be really tight, and I think it'll go either way. I just think maybe at home Saracens, just maybe. Quins v Bristol. Now put your wee Quins hat to one side and let us know.
Well, I mean, I'll be at that game, so I can't put my hat too much to the side. But if it was any other week, I'd probably sort of my hope for Quins is kind of gone. Quins had the big result at the weekend, which kind of means we're going to be absolutely awful this week. But it's big game, and you can't bet against Quins at big game. Like if there's any game Quins are going to win, it's big game, and if they don't, then just get rid of the season. Might as well just go home now. So I think I'm expecting a high scoring from both sides. Quins win.
I think if you get both teams on form, it will be an incredible match. It like attacking, free flowing rugby, power in the forwards. It'd be great. I feel if you get both teams on form, Bristol will absolutely hammer you. Because I think on form they're the best team in the competition, to be honest. Um, but that's if they show up. If they don't show up, then you will hammer them, which it's weird. But I'm going to go Bristol just because I do think they are the best team. I'm just waiting for them to play Bath and Bath just to do the South African thing on them and just bully them while they try and play some nice rugby. So yeah, and finally we move on to Bath and Newcastle. Oh, how do you think this one will go?
I'm, I mean, it's first v 10, so on paper you're going to say Bath, but part of me really does kind of sense a bit of a, maybe I'm just being a contrarian, but part of me does sense a Newcastle upset. They've just had back-to-back wins in the Challenge Cup. That's got to be good for, like, I,
Sorry. Right. The man who said the Challenge Cup is dead. Yeah, they got two great wins. Go for it.
it, yeah, I think Bath will win it, but I can see a
Mhm.
Newcastle upset. It's very much sort of head saying one thing, heart saying something else. And I do have a bit of a soft spot for Newcastle, given everything that's gone on with them this year. I don't know. I'll be a contrarian. I'm going to say Newcastle win it.
I think we all have a soft spot for them. I think. Now, I was listening earlier. Bath rested Spencer against Toulon, so big team coming up to Newcastle on the weekend. It might not be good for them. No, I just think the Bath, even their B team, have too much for Newcastle, to be honest. Um, I can't see it going any other way. I think maybe for the first 10 minutes it will be 10-7 to Bath, and that then you'll just get a blowout. So that's my view. But look. Anyway, to everyone who's listened, I would like to thank you all for once again tuning in. I'd like to thank Henry for obviously his attendance and showing up and having this lovely chat about rugby.
Anytime.
So look, we'll let you go, and thank you very much for listening to the past couple of episodes as well. And look forward to hearing from you next week. Goodbye.